All right, everyone. Welcome to the HGC post show. I guess this is the concluding HGC post show for phase 2, group stage number 1. I guess that's what they're calling it. It's phase 2, stage 1. That still sounds pretty confusing to me. I don't understand. There's 4 quarters, essentially, and they're each broken up into 2 phases. Why not like quarter 1, phase 1, quarter 1, phase 2, quarter 2, phase 1? Also, I'm getting information about things I need to be providing to things. I know that was not clear. And I don't really need for it to be. Anyway, moving along. So, as always, we're going to start out with recommended series for the week from each region. And we're actually going to do, I think, let me just make sure I have this right. So I believe this is right. I believe WKG has literally not won a game until they won this game versus RPG. So we have a team in Chinese HGC, which is a different format and is wonky, that has literally not won a game. And then they won a game. So I'm going to recommend that game, not for the game itself, exactly, but for Tetris and Kendrick Swish's reaction to it. If you watch their cast, it was pretty funny. It's pretty funny. There's really not much to say about China, honestly. The Reborn E-Star, Challenge Everything, and Super Perfect Team are doing really, really well. Everyone else is like far, far below them. It is the single largest skill gap that exists in any region's HGC by far. So it's just not good. China's just not in a good place. It's kind of unfortunate. We're starting with them because that's the low note. We're gonna move on up to high notes. Korea had some games. A lot of these games did not matter. A lot of these games, straight up, win or lose, would not have changed the seeding or the standings moving into midseason brawl or into BlizzCon. And there were a couple series where people were up 2-0, and they were like, let's just do something, right? The big one there is Gazlo was played by MVP Black on Infernal Shrines. Yeah, Gazlo was played by Rich. For those of you who aren't aware, Rich is a Gazlo troll, self-described Gazlo troll. He will play Gazlo in Hero League whenever he feels quote-unquote trollish, just because it tilts people, just for the fun of it. Hamburger Necklace, thank you for the follow. So, but he's played probably 1,000 games of Gazlo, all told. Like, he's a very, very, very experienced Gazlo player. So they were up 2-0. They were against Raven. They didn't think they were going to lose, but they did pick Gazlo competitive on arguably his best competitive map. I would say that Gazlo definitely has some advantages on Infernal Shrines. So I would recommend watching just this game if you want to see some pretty hilarious gameplay, to be honest. There's some funny moments in that game. Other than that, there wasn't that much going on in Korea this go around. Lily was also picked into Gul'dan. I don't know why, but this is a Lily and Gazlo in the same series, so you get to have some interesting fun stuff going on. Yeah, there wasn't a lot going on in Korea this weekend. If you wanted to watch a real set, you could watch the Mighty vs. L5. Mighty actually did manage to take a game, which is good for them. And MVP Miracle actually lost straight up to Blossom, which most people were not expecting, but Blossom has definitely been improving over time. Claims to be trolling to not draw attention to real strat. Let's save NA for last, because NA, a lot of interesting things happened. DB Smiley has a really good article coming out about exactly how teams ended up in the clash or didn't. So I'm not going to tread on his toes with that. It's going to be up on gfe.gg. I encourage you to follow the website, check the website regularly for those content updates. But in terms of recommended series, I'm going to again not break the mold. I'm going to go with the 3-2. It's going to be Team Liquid versus Team Expert. I think this is one of the most critical games, or critical sets in terms of deciding who ended up going to the Clash, because there were possibilities in a 3-0 situation where Dignitas was going to go to the Clash and Expert was not. But then if Expert won even a single game, they got to go. As long as it was not a 3-0 for Liquid. And you can kind of see the desperation, I want to say, that Team Expert played with in a couple of the games. And as soon as they won a game, they slacked off a little bit. They relaxed slightly, which obviously makes sense. Because it's obviously very, very stressful to be in that situation where you really want to go to this international event. So encourage you to watch this series. Did not talk about NA yet. There are some trends with drafting in EU that I want to talk about, but they're related. But since someone asked a question about that in the Reddit thread, yeah, if Expert had 3-0'd, then Dignitas would have had a chance or something like that. I don't know. It's been a long weekend for me, but this series mattered a lot. And if you're going to watch it and you haven't watched it yet, the casters go over it in a great deal of detail. So, Caldor and Trixler on the ball for that entire series. And then NA. Hey, Ezerman. Lovely. Something going on in the private GFE Discord that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. Yeah, and there will be an article on gfe.gg for people who want more details going forward about what could have happened. And there is currently one now that explains all the possibilities of how Dignitas could have ended up in Clash, and you can see why they didn't. Not going to rehash that article. It's brilliantly written. DB Smiley is on top of that already. So, 4NA, Tempo Storm versus Team Freedom has got to be the game. Again, another situation where I believe the outcome mattered not only for seeding, but for who ended up going to the Clash. I believe there was a road where if Tempo Storm 3-0'd and Roll20 3-0'd, Roll20 could potentially go to the Clash over Tempo Storm, or maybe Tempo Storm got 3-0'd, if Team Freedom 3-0'd Tempo Storm. Again, DB Smiley's article has more details. But I want to recommend the series, Tempo Storm versus Team Freedom. Team Freedom has come a very, very long way in a very, very short period of time, to the point where they're easily the number 1 or number 2 team in NA right now. Depending, I believe by results, they end up being number 2. Yeah, 6-5. But so yeah, Freedom at 3-0, Tempo, then Roll20 would have gone to Tiebreakers versus Tempo. So it didn't happen. Obviously, we now know who's going to the Clash. But again, it's a set that's very much worth watching, and I think it was the most competitive series of the entire weekend. The other ones were fairly one-sided in what ended up happening. Roll20 pulled out some interesting drafts. Roll20 versus No Tomorrow is interesting because it shows, in many ways, No Tomorrow has had inconsistent success. Sometimes they're really, really on point, sometimes they're not. And I think that's a stylistic thing in many ways. I think No Tomorrow, Equinox has a style of play that he likes, and when he can get drafts that fit that style, his team does very, very well because he's very comfortable with it, and he's the the drafter and the shot caller now. And when he can't get styles that he's super, super comfortable with, it ends up being a little bit different. Also, it's not a style that plays well into what Roll20 likes to do. So it's an unfavorable matchup in terms of teams. I see Chen won all his games in that set. I'm not saying Chen is broken, guys. I'm not going to say it. Do you think No Tomorrow just got lucky earlier, but they're not really that strong of a team? I think there's a stylistic problem with No Tomorrow. I literally just said that. No Tomorrow has a specific style that they like to run. They really like to run pick-style comps. They have an aggressive rotation style. It's almost like old-school Tempest, where they would draft like one wave clear hero or one global, and the rest of the team would just be roaming for picks. Tempest's style dropped off because of the mount speed change. That's what really dropped Tempest out, and they had to essentially relearn how to play the game with a different style of play because their current style wasn't work. It just wasn't fast enough. But then we have the situation. So you have situations always where teams, where certain styles are good against other styles, and Roll20 style is good against what Equinox likes to play. And so between trying to adjust to Roll20's drafts and trying to adjust styles to be a little more successful, they just didn't have the range yet. In an ideal world, a team would be able to play any style. You'd just be able to, like, these are your heroes, this is the style I want you to play. And a team would be like, okay, and they would just go do that style. Realistically, teams tend to fall into certain molds about what they want them to do. I mean, we talk about macro teams, we talk about team fight teams, we talk about strategy teams, like they just really have really interesting strategies all the time. A lot of Chinese teams, especially Super Perfect Team, fall into that mold, and that's the result of their, they've been together a long time, and their drafter is really, really innovative in the way he does things with the meta. He's the guy who brought Zag back into the meta, which brought him into NA eventually. He's the guy who always played Dahaka in China, or at least always drafted Dahaka in China. I think someone else on this team actually played it. And then come BlizzCon, the Chinese team show up, they're playing Dahaka, everyone sees how strong it is, and Dahaka starts wrecking at BlizzCon. And it is important to have innovators like that in the professional scene, or you will get into a relatively static meta where people aren't innovating, and it'll just come down to who has better mechanics, because everyone sort of understands the meta. I try and define the meta as what people know currently, right? They know currently what's going on, and it's what everyone knows is true. So Li Ming is bad under Nubrak, and then as that develops, like, Li Ming could be bad under Nubrak. You have to just avoid the Nubrak completely, but you need to Disintegrate for Cocoon. So you have a higher execution at a even level of execution. Li Ming is bad under Nubrak. If the Li Ming is better than the Nubrak in many ways, then a Li Ming is actually a counter to a Nubrak if you count the entire team focus. And that was a development in the meta, and then we started seeing Li Ming get intentionally drafted into a Nubrak, stuff like that. So innovators are people who set the meta because they have an understanding that goes beyond what everyone knows. And if you don't have innovators on your team, you better have an innovator in your region, or you're never going to be able to go to an international event. And I think this is actually one of the major problems for North America. Now that they're getting consistent practice, and now that they're doing really well, we haven't actually seen very much innovation from North America in terms of drafts. We haven't seen it. And if you go to an international event, I'm not saying that maybe they're doing it behind closed doors. We don't necessarily know that. If I did know it, I couldn't talk about it. But if you go up against a team like Fnatic or like Team Liquid, who have some innovative drafts, and you aren't innovating, and you're not thinking about those things and aware of the potential possibilities in a draft, like midway through, you don't see the danger signs because you don't understand what heroes are capable of necessarily, you're going to be in an awkward position. So my new concern for North America is that we are improving dramatically in terms of team synergy, much faster than I thought we would, actually, because of the roster swaps. It's actually been really, really good for the region. But I haven't seen enough innovative drafting. I would like to see some more innovative drafting. I think one reason Fnatic is so good is because they are a bit more flexible. They are really good in team fighting, but also macro. Yes, Fnatic is an all-rounder team. If I were going to pick a team and be like, that team could play any style if they wanted to, it would be Fnatic. They could play globals, they can play picks, they can play meta or macro, they can play to the objective, they can play for split pressure, they can play for level advantages. Fnatic is reasonably good at all of those. They're better at some than others, just because their hero pools lend themselves slightly better, like Quacknix's hero pool. If there's anything Falstad's good at, then Fnatic is good at it, because Quacknix is so good at Falstad. If there's anything Greymane's good at, Fnatic is good at it, because Quacknix is so good at Greymane. He's not top tier on he's not as I don't even say that he's not as good at other heroes as he is at those. Like his Lunara is not as good as his Greymane. It's not even close. But Fnatic is definitely the closest to being a real, true all-arounder team, I think. And I can't think of a team that really comes as close. So, moving on. Any quick questions about that topic before we move on to the Reddit thread questions? We had some good ones this week. Definitely excited. First Reddit through question. Cure took immolation. Why? This is not. Let me see if I'm going to bring up. I'm actually a little bit surprised at this question, just because either Immolation or Battered Assault has been pretty much the standard on Illidan since his recent set of changes, and it's actually pretty simple. So this is Illidan's level 1 talents. You have Immolation, which gives you essentially a damage aura every time you use your W. Battered Assault, if you hit 2 targets, you get a bonus, and it increases the duration from 3 to 5 seconds, which is obviously huge because it gives Illidan that additional damage. Unending Haters is basically a talent you'll never see taken in competitive. It just doesn't work correctly with Illidan's kit, and it's just not great. So Immolation, it's Immolation versus Battered Assault. Immolation is the better soul winning talent. Immolation is the better Merc or PvE talent. So if you're doing a lot of Merc camps as Illidan, you should take Immolation 100% of the time. And it's the better 1v1 talent in general. So if you're on a big map that is going to involve less team fighting and more skirmishing, you're going to get more value of Immolation on average. Battered Assault is really good against double or triple frontline. It's really good in all-out team fights. It's really good if you have multiple hard supports. So if you have, a Tassadar or a Tass Uther or Ariel Uther or something like that, if you have any two supports, it's going to give you a lot more damage in those knockdown and drag out team fights. Immolation also does really well against blind comps because you're missing out on damage when you're blinded. Immolation gives you some damage at least when you're blinded. So this is Cursed Hollow. Illidan's job on Cursed Hollow in the early game is to try and, as hard as possible, to win a lane against someone, whoever he's in lane against. Usually it will end up being another solo laner, like a Dahaka or a Tassadar. In this case, or a Chen, unfortunately, because Chen got picked up at the end there, which is not fantastic. Evasive, also. Evasive Brawler also, works like a blind. You're missing attacks. You're going to do some damage to the Chen via Immolation when that happens. So Illidan's job is essentially to get camps so that the camps are pressuring during tributes. Battered Assault would have been really good versus Chen Dahaka because he probably could have gotten it off fairly consistently, but it wouldn't have necessarily been perfect. And he also was, I believe he went. The current meta is to go hunt. So we can bring this up here. And did in fact go hunt. Current meta is to go hunt, and when you're hunting something like a Tracer or hunting any of the fragile backline targets, the extra damage from Immolation is guaranteed. You're more likely to be able to kill a very low health target with Immolation than you are to get the long drawn out value from Battered Assault. So it's really the question: are you going to be doing Merc camps? Are you going to be solo winning? Are you going to be 1v1ing? Who's your target of choice as a team? Is it you're going to have long, drawn-out team fights where you need to wear down the front line, or you're going to have short, fast team fights where you're just going to get a pick? Immolation is better for one. Yeah, and Battered Assault's better for the other one. I noticed Li Ming got picked into Brightwing a lot this week. I'm just curious as to why to do Brightwing's ability to give spell armor. Is the next question. That did happen a little bit. That is in fact true. We got quite a few Brightwing picks, and we got Li Ming picked in this game. It happened. This ended up being a loss. I don't think people are 100% respecting double bacon cheeseburger carne asada burrito. Double bacon cheeseburger. It's pretty close, though. I don't think people are respecting the amount of spell shield that Brightwing gives. It is hard to react with the Pixie Dust in time to like absorb a Li Ming Orb, because you got to ask yourself, is it going to hit? Okay, it's going to hit. I'm going to put it on. But I don't know. Is Li Ming actually good against Brightwing? I feel like it's not the worst thing in the world, because Brightwing does reasonably well with sustained damage, right? Because her healing is constant over time. And definitely she doesn't have a burst save mechanic outside of Dust. And Li Ming is good against Tracer task comps, because Tracer can be burst through even with a shield. I feel like that's an execution thing, right? It's you're not only forcing yourself to execute well, but you're putting a certain burden of execution on the enemy team. It's not like a straight up counter, but it gives you a tool that you can maybe use to deal with the situation. Also, Li Ming's just really good on Cursed Hollow because of tribute delay, which is something you always have to consider. You always want to consider, ideally, does a hero accent the map objective? So yes, we saw Li Ming drafted into Brightwing a couple of times this weekend. And there are possibilities there for Li Ming to have a really high impact. But also, all the games we're seeing, all the games that I'm seeing where she was drafted into the Brightwing, she accented the map objective as well. So that's an important consideration. A lot of questions from Zane Hyde. Like a lot of questions. Team Freedom placed an extremely high value on Stitches in their series against Storm. In Game 1 on Sky Temple, they first banned a new Brack, watched June take Uther, and responded with Stitches Genji. In Game 2 on Cursed Hollow, they third picked it with a noob open into a task to Haka, neither of which were practical hook targets, that's true. Tempo ran into their composition with Tracer, Brightwing, and Chen. Team Freedom was clearly punished for an overvaluation of Stitches hook, and the lack of RCC on their main tank into Haka, Chen, Tracer heavily hurt them that game. That's fair. I'll say that's fair. I would actually say that the primary problem with Team Freedom's draft going into Game 2 is they did not have a CC follow-up for Hook. Here's a really simple rule for drafting Stitches. Does someone on your team have follow-up CC to the Hook? Stukov has Silence. That's pretty decent. Malf has Root. Uther has Stun. Kael'thas has Stun. Someone else on your team needs to have a Stun, Root, or Silence, or you should not draft Stitches. It's that simple. And I actually think we went through this last week because we talked about the same thing, and I think we found that Stitches actually had literally not won a game if the team had zero follow-up to Hook. Like, they literally, Stitches doesn't necessarily win every game where it is true, but he loses every game where it's not true. So I think that's the problem, right? Arthas is fine. Arthas Stitches is a really, really good combo. You just need follow-up CC to hooks. Stitches can do a lot of things really, really well, but if you don't draft follow-up CC to his hook, you're essentially ignoring a quarter of his kit. You're not enabling a full 25% of a hero, at which point, even if Stitches is functioning at 75%, you could have drafted another hero who had been functioning at 100%. If you don't draft a good Sank target, then Tyrael's not that useful, right? There's all these considerations. In order for a draft to be optimal, every part of every hero's kit has to meaningfully contribute to what your team is trying to do. If you do not have follow-up CC to Hook, Hook is a non-starter. It doesn't do anything. In the classic combo, where we've seen Stitches Kerosene, there was a Tassadar, and it was Hook into Force Wall into 7-sided, which is a really good isolation style of play. but there was force wall, right? It denied people just walking away, and it denied the enemy team coming into the follow up, so that seven sided was guaranteed to be all in one target. That's a classic strategy. I'm surprised we actually aren't seeing more of it, considering how popular Stitches and Tassadar both are, and how well you can draft comps with that in mind. Yeah, I don't think Stitches was the problem there necessarily. I think it was not respecting that Stitches needs certain things. I don't think Stitches is being overvalued necessarily, just because they have a very good Stitches player on Zugrug. I think that they're not correctly evaluating what needs to be polymorph. Like in game one, they'd polymorph, which they lost this game too. But and I think it's one of those things you need to practice a lot as a team, following up on hooks. If you have a Stitches is a hero in many ways, where the entire comp becomes about Stitches. We've seen them with Illidan, we've seen them with Tracer. If you have a Tracer comp, the entire comp should be about Tracer. Especially if you have a Tassadar. If you have an Illidan, in like old school Illidan, if you had an Illidan, the entire comp was about Illidan. If Illidan died, you lost. If Illidan lived, you won. And Stitches is one of those heroes where if you draft Stitches, a lot of the times the comp becomes about the Stitches, and not playing with him appropriately and drafting for him appropriately so he has that follow-up is just a mistake. It's worth noting that the last time Tempo Storm drafted Stitches was on Battlefield in Naventic 3 weeks ago. The time before that on Towers. They were similarly dumpstered by high mobility Tracer, Genji, and Gale Force. Yeah, mobility is an issue for Stitches. Definitely. But mobility is more of an issue for Stitches when there's no follow-up CC. If you have, follow-up CC, it's less of an issue. You just need to be able to hit the hook. Which JPL has proven is possible. Whether or not other people can do it. But it's possible. You previously described siege compositions as the default compositions. It's the easiest to execute. That's what I said. There's levels of execution in Heroes of the Storm that go up as comps and strategies become more complicated. Pushing is the default. Pushing is the easiest thing to execute because all you have to do is focus on your lanes and you push in. You don't even have to necessarily that objective. They have a much lower skill for it, yes. We've seen compositions both out of NA and Primary Grooming, yes. And lately with the advent of Chen. However, teams don't seem to draft Siege for level 1 to 10 tempo. Towers at level 1 seems to be more of a helpful upside of a natural power picks than a specific draft decision. It's a specific draft decision. If you're going for an early game comp, you generally know it. Sometimes teams will just be like, well, this is good against that, and they'll end up with an early game comp, and then they'll play it in the beginning of the game comp. But sometimes teams will draft an early game comp, not play it like an early game, they won't go for any kind of pressure, and then they'll lose late game because they didn't pressure enough. Usually into a late game composition. Every Nazebo win from Team Freedom last year, or last phase, I should say, was basically that's what happened. They got Nazebo, no one pressured them. They just played passively until 20, and then they won the game. You can't do that. You have to understand if you have an earlier late game composition, and some teams do and some teams don't. What compositions or heroes could be better utilized to fill that meta void? E-Star, Solo Tank, Diva, and Zarya come to mind. Yeah, Diva and Zarya are both really good early game push heroes. Especially if you can manipulate the draft in such a way that you trick the enemy team into thinking you're going to go for a conventional comp and then end up not picking a tank. We've talked about that a lot on the show. Do you know of any such compositions that retain enough power post 10 to square off the current meta power sources? No. Depending on the map, you can draft... Like, Dignitas drafted a solo tank Diva a couple weeks ago on Infernal Shrines. It ended up really well. If you're going to go for a quote-unquote tankless composition with some of the more bruisery, high damage warriors, they need to be able to accent the objective in some way. Where am I reading from? Every Monday, I post a Reddit thread for the HGC post show, so that if people have really detailed questions that they want answers to, because this gives me time to analyze them in advance, which is obviously very useful. You're gonna potentially lose straight up team fights with that style of composition if you're not already ahead in levels. Obviously, you don't have to. You can always, there's always possibilities. You have a lot of tools, but it is definitely easier to win via tempo. And a big part of that is the drafting, because they assume you're gonna pick a tank, right? It's not a strategy you can do all the time, or people would twig to it and they would draft against it. They would draft anti-siege heroes like Chromie. But if you do it like 5 or 10% of the time, like every so often you just pull out tankless out of nowhere. Teams will always be on edge drafting against you, but they won't expect you to do it in any given game, but it really is important that the warriors you pick accent the objective in some way, so that if you can't win just by pushing, you can win by getting the objective. Diva on Infernal Shrines is a really good example of this, because Diva's explosion is so good on Infernal Shrines. It's so good at objective. And Diva's actually really good at accenting the objective on Cursed Hollow, because her ability to delay by herself is insane. She can, Q, she can Q in, she can be annoying, and she can Q out. If you do end up killing the mech, she goes back into pilot mode, and she can poke a wave near the tribute, get back into her mech pretty quickly, and then continue to harass you with the tribute. Diva may be one of the best delayers. Obviously on specific tributes, there's heroes that have huge advantages because they can delay over the wall or whatever. But Diva can delay pretty much every tribute relatively safely, except for the mid 2. But she can just delay 4 out of 6 tribute spawns pretty convincingly. Sometimes it's posted by as underappreciated lackeys. I don't have any underappreciated lackeys. I only have appreciated lackeys. So an early comp goal would be to use early game advantage to create a large level lead and then ride the wave to core damage. Yes, that's how pressure comps work. You can actually see, and then there's a lot of good examples of that in old school Zarya comps. If you go back and look at Braxis with like Zarya compositions, especially in North America, there's a lot of good examples of that. Do you think part of the reason Freedom lost the series to Tempo is because Tempo punished the first pick Genji? Yes. And I've been saying this for a long time. Genji is a very punishable first pick in the draft, but you have to draft around it correctly, and then you have to play around it correctly. And Tempo Storm has a very thoughtful team, so they're good at punishing things like that. My team tried Shrines Diva. We were down 20 minions, nothing. 1 mech explosion tied the count. Yeah. End zone the mount, so we got the Shrine. So yeah, Diva is just really, really, really good on Shrines. I actually think they nerfed the wrong thing when they nerfed Diva. I'm kind of sad. They nerfed everything about her that was meh, and they made it worse, and they left everything about her that was overpowered alone. So she's still really good at the things she was really good at, but her ability to like solo lane is now significantly worse, and her ability to do camps is significantly worse, and like all these utility things that made her more than just a knock people away and blow up bot were significantly nerfed, and I don't think those are the things that should have been changed. She's less fun to play now, in my opinion, as a result, because you don't feel as versatile. If they'd evened out her power level a little bit, but left her versatility, I think that would have been better. At this moment, apparently there's a link here. You guys get a link.
Here they come in. June's on one side, and the rest on the other.
Alright, so the question is, at this moment, when Team Freedom is blindsided by Tempo Storm, what was the perfect call that would have won the fight for Freedom? With enough foresight, would simply walking to the right, closer to hostile keeps be enough, as it would waste Panda Pals and phase shift? Should the first priority when being ambushed in a specific area be creating space instead of counterattacking? Team Freedom clearly wasn't quick enough to win the fight. After the dive on Tracer, their team fight was extremely sloppy. We're probably going to have to watch this more than once. Just gonna say it.
There's gonna be the phase shift on top. June comes in, hoping to separate the fight out. Got Dragon Blade though for Dansky.
Asm is so low. The palm.
It's at 720, but it's blurry. It's blurry for me.
Hero though is gonna go down.
Alright. So, even Talentiers, Team Freedom is pushing top, trying to get as much value as they can here. Illidan is in the bush. Mid. He sees the entire enemy team, or except for Brightwing. Like he sees them. I believe the Hawk is on a minion wave.
All kinds of wrong.
And they get the entire wall there. They have the siege camp pressure here as well. Illidan starts rotating up, and Chen actually gets there first. Oh no, he jumped over the wall. All right, so now we're 5. They're a little overextended. They have a minion wave here. That is tanking the shots currently. Getting out of here without killing the fort is much, much, much more dangerous. So the question is, do they continue to go right and avoid the flank here? Or do they pick a fight? Heroics are all available for both teams. They are trying to go instantly for the Tracer, but... Or not for the Tracer, excuse me, for the...
And the rest on the...
Whatever hero Psalm is playing. That is Tracer. I'm crazy. So I was like, no, wait, that is Tracer. I was looking over here for some reason, because they're on opposite sides. I'm a little tired, guys. I don't... Like, the Tash Shield comes out instantly. That's an armored Tash Shield. So Tracer now has 15 armor. Like, the moment this breaks.
On top. June comes in, hoping to separate the fight out. We've got Dragon Blade, though, for Dansky.
Asthma is so low. The palm, does it get procced? It does.
Kira, though, is going to...
I don't see how you win that fight, honestly. Like, I don't understand the rotation from mid. Illidan has Hunt. His objective is to be not with his team and to have the global split pressure. So why didn't he stay mid? I think if they go this way, they easily get chased down. Genji, maybe Genji gets away, but Tracer has a lot of mobility. Dahaka can walk through a bush and catch up pretty significantly. They can't mount for quite a while because the tower is still alive right here. Even if they killed the fort, they couldn't like walk to the right and mount up. They don't like Stitches can't get away, period. So if they can't instantly get that kill off the Hunt, I don't think with a solo support Kharazim that they win a sustain war. That's one of the rules against double support, is that you just don't win sustained fights. That's why double support is so strong, is because over a long enough fight, you're pretty much guaranteed to win against any conventional composition. So they don't instantly get the pick onto Tracer. Everyone should abandon ship and leave Zugrug to die. But I don't understand the decision by Cure to rotate top when he has Hunt. Why didn't he stay mid? He could have backed up and like waited for them to rotate away and then cleared mid. That would have allowed him to pick up this tribute for free if they decided not to engage here. And again, Stitches, everyone else could get away. Like, Kharazim can dash to Genji or Li Ming. Li Ming can teleport away. Illidan's not there. So they're trading Stitches for a fort and a tribute when they're behind in experience. That's not a great trade. It's a really good ice block. I mean, it's pretty close. Like, in the end, that fight was pretty close. It ended up being 3 for 2. If Illidan hadn't rotated, he would have picked up one more wave and then hunted in, and you would have seen probably a very similar result. 4 for 2. Yeah. I feel like Illidan wasn't abusing his global mobility there as best he could have. But I don't think going to the right would have saved them. I think that would have just put them in a worse position. Unfortunate. Cav Hug emoticon went. I do not have an emoticon artist yet. If anyone knows an emoticon artist who you would recommend, feel free to refer them to me. Isn't Diva's level 4 Bring It On strictly inferior to Fusion Generator? Bring It On increases Diva's nuke charge from 30% per mech to 40% per mech. Fusion Generator provides a flat 50% charge. So yeah, what we're talking about is these are the talents we're talking about here. Here's Diva. So it's level 4. Fusion Generator, or Bring It On, self-destruct's charge amount gained from losing mech health increased by 30%. So you gain charge from your mech equal to 30% for 100% of mech health, so it's increased by 30%, which is another 10%. So 40% charge for an entire mech's health bar. Versus Fusion Generator, every time an enemy hero deals damage while inside defense matrix. The thing about a Fusion Generator is it has counterplay. If you get stunned out, obviously defense matrix gets turned off. If people stop doing damage, it gets turned off. If other things happen, but one good Fusion Generator is strictly better than Bring It On because it's 15% versus 10%. It's really not a debate. It's just a question of what level of play people you're playing against. If you're in a situation like it's the same thing for Palm, right? If you're timing with Palm, you're up against players where you put Palm on someone and it never triggers because they just stop attacking them. if you're at that level of play, then you're going to be like, well, I'm never going to get any value out of Palm. I may as well go 7-sided. This was the original reason that several Koreans went 7-sided instead, and then 7-sided I'm getting a lot of value in the isolation pick comp style, this composition that was popular at the time. And then we've seen, some players go back to Palm because they started to get really good at it. We've actually even seen a slight preference for Palm at LANs because of the, zero ping. When you're at a LAN event, they're playing on a local server that Blizzard sets up. So there's absolutely no ping, like zero, like literally zero ping, maybe 5 milliseconds. And that makes Palm significantly better because you can cut the timing much more finely. Bakery loves playing with Palm at LANs. It says it's one of his favorite things whenever he goes to LAN, or it was one of his favorite things whenever he went to LAN. So it depends. I think against the vast majority of players, Fusion Generator is going to be better. It's going to give you way more charge. But against literal professional players, Bring It On is 100% reliably going to give you that 10% no matter what. And that's a big consideration for if you're trying to evaluate talent choices in professional play. Why Fnatic lost the first series versus playing Ducks? This doesn't mean anything for the Clash. It doesn't change seeding in any way, shape, or form. But the question: how did playing Ducks win? And I think the question answers itself in some ways. How did playing Ducks win 3-1 over Fnatic? Well, the series didn't matter to Fnatic. Fnatic, every team does better when they prep. They go into a match like, okay, we need to seriously prep for this team. This is what they like to do. This is what we're going to do. This is what we can do against them. This is what we can't do against them. And Fnatic has been doing that week over week, as demonstrated by their match record. So there's a lot of potential explanations here. One of them is they just didn't take playing Ducks very seriously because playing Ducks hasn't been doing very well, which I think is probably a reasonable explanation. Don't know if it's true. I could ask actually. I could ask Quacknix. I always feel weird asking teams if they didn't take a team seriously. Sometimes I don't want to know the answer because then I have to tell people. But I really think it comes down to the fact that it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. Fnatic's seeding wasn't going to change. In theory, this match could matter for BlizzCon down the line, but Fnatic is currently so dominant in Europe that I just don't think it was an issue, if that makes sense. I would say that playing Ducks drafted fairly well in this series. In their last two games, they leaned a lot on Illidan without a whole lot of ways necessarily to deal with the Illidan. So that is a pretty good factor. And they also got Tassadar, 2 out of 3 wins. Tassadar currently is pretty strong, as I'm sure everyone who's been watching HGC is aware. I can't imagine any team publicly saying they're beneath our concern. We're not taking this seriously about any other team. There was an official Blizzard interview for the previous Western Clash where they asked every team, or at least the captains of every team, how they felt about every other team that was going to end up going to the Clash. And Splendor's response, Team Liquid response to every minor region team was literally minor region shrug. You can go read it. That was his response. Bearing in mind they lost 1 game and almost lost 2 games to Nomia at that event, so they might not have that attitude anymore. But teams have literally said that publicly about other teams, that we're not really worried about them. We basically can't take playing them seriously because they're so far below us in terms of execution and skill or drafting or whatever. Yeah. A few of the times, and I'm not thinking of these, were like in good fun. They were like, teasing. Like some days you lose and some days you play an A. That happened at the midseason brawl. That was an actual thing. That was meant in jest. Whereas most of the instances I'm thinking of, teams were serious. They're like, we just don't feel any concern about playing against this team. but it does happen. And I think that's the most likely explanation. I don't think Fnatic necessarily played badly. I don't necessarily think they drafted badly, but they definitely did not perform to their usual level against a team like Playing Ducks. Playing Ducks obviously played exceptionally well, and I think that came down to just Fnatic didn't prep for the match very much because they didn't take it seriously for one reason or another. Either they didn't care or they just were tired. There's always a lot of factors that go into execution that we don't necessarily get to see as viewers. Can Expert win games versus TLV? So that's this series. So TLV win game 2, Team Expert won. Game 3, Team Expert won. Game 4, TLV win. And game 5, this is my favorite part, TLV was banned. Not just banned, but first banned. And if anyone from Liquid's staff is watching, I know there's a couple people on the Liquid analytics team who watch this show. I would encourage you, when you're at Midseason Brawl, to just pick Vikings every draft in the group stages. Just every draft. Because if you can win enough games with Vikings in the group stages, you can go into the bracket play and force people to be banning Vikings against Hasuobs. I'm not saying you have to pick it early. I'm not saying you have to, do anything like that. But if you pick it enough and you draw first bans out like this one, it gives you so much strength in the draft. Teams that have one player who's just god tier on a hero that does not get played very much gives you such a huge advantage in the draft because people don't want to put their practice time in playing against that one hero. They would rather put their practice time playing against every other hero and just ban it. And when you have anything that's considered cheesy but your team's really good at it, or you have a player that can do that, like Medivh for a long time, Roll20 still takes advantage of this just by drawing respect bans on Medivh. Force enemy teams to ban Vikings against you or just play Vikings. It doesn't affect the draft that much. You can still, if you're building a strong 3-man versus building a strong 4-man, it's not that big a difference. And it's a drafting style you excel with anyway, so I would like to see it. I think it would give you a really good advantage. And you wouldn't have to really any strategies either because you would just be Vikings all the time, which is really, really good. But apparently Expert cannot win games versus at least Hasuob's TLV. I'm sure they could win games versus other players' TLV, but Hasuob's is a really, really good Vikings player. I mean, he was one of the best EU professional StarCraft 2 players in the world for a good period of time, and he is an exceptional Vikings player. For those of you who have never watched Bad Benny Hots, thank you for the host. Appreciate it a lot. For those of you who have never watched Hasuob's play Vikings in great detail, I guess you want to call it 3v1 to Greymane. He 3v1 to Greymane not too long ago as Vikings. He actually killed Greymane as Vikings. Most people think of Vikings as this hero that just soaks, but Hasuob's soaks with them, sure, but he also actually secures kills, wins lanes, takes down buildings, gets camp pressure up all the time, everywhere. The things that Hasuob's can do with Vikings is scary. It's just absolutely terrifying. I'm sure Bad Benny would agree. You can actually ask Bad Benny, did you agree with the Vikings ban here? We're curious if you're actually watching. If you didn't just host me and go straight to eating. You're welcome, Wim17. Don't remind me. For those of you who are just tuning in, this is the HGC post show I do every Tuesday. Just talking about the weekend. We go over every single region. We try and highlight some of the more interesting drafts, and there's always a Reddit thread posted on Mondays, so you can ask questions. I mean, ban is kind of irrelevant. So you don't think the ban affected the draft that much? But since this is a comfort pick, we just denied it. That's fair. And that's the beauty, right? That was what we were talking about, is that if a team has an unconventional hero where someone's really, really good at it, then drawing respect bans does help a little bit. They would get a similar composition anyway. Play around 4-man double support and so on. Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Ciao Chilla, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Story of the series on their part. I mean, it does definitely seem to be a comp they excel with. I'm actually very excited that Zool is back in the meta for them, because it definitely seems like any hero that can double soak relatively safely and put a lot of pressure is going to enable a lot of 3 and 4-man play styles, and Team Liquid seems to excel at that. So I'm looking forward to them playing Zool at least a little bit at the Western Clash. Maybe I'm off base with that. Maybe we won't see too much Zool. I think we're going to see a little bit of Zool at the Western Clash from a variety of teams, but I'm excited in particular to see it from Team Liquid. It's a very close series, though. You guys played really, really well. What makes the Task Tracer combo so strong on Tomb of the Spider Queen? Both Fnatic and Dignitas destroyed their opponents with it. This is a reasonable question. I will say that Task is always strong on Tomb of the Spider Queen. Good night, Benny. Thanks for stopping by. This guy plays for Gale Force. I do not play for Gale Force Esports. I am sponsored by Gale Force Esports. I'm the primary content creator, and I do work directly with the team to make some of the educational content that goes up on Gale Force's website. Any thoughts on Zool builds now? Q versus W versus Trait? Honestly, all of Zool's talent seem reasonable right now. And many of them seem situational in many ways. So I don't think he has like a fixed build. I think it definitely comes down to the map, the comp you're up against, the comp you have on your team. Obviously, you know, higher CC comps benefit some of his other talents more than others. And I think they actually, Blizzard did a reasonably good job. I do think the W build may be a little overtuned in the situations where the W build is really good. So if you find yourself in a situation where the W build is going to be good, that's probably going to be the strongest choice by far. But it's not good in every situation, if that makes sense. When is W good? W is good against on maps where there's lots of targets. So Infernal Shrines, where you're fighting in lane, so Tomb of the Spider Queen and Dragonshire, or when the enemy team has a really big front line and you have a team that can help you step up and actually attack their front line. Whether that means double support or 2 other tanks, you know, flanking for you so that you're not really in any danger. They have a lot of peel. Situations like that. But a lot of the time I see Zool drafted, you know, single support. He's essentially the other frontliner and has just a tank into a team that also only has 2 frontliners. In that situation, like if you're on Cursed Hollow and that was the situation, it wouldn't necessarily be like fantastic. Moving on, so Tomb of the Spider Queen. What makes Tass Tracer? Well, this... What's happened? Tomb of the Spider Queen. So first thing you got to realize is that Tassadar is always good on Tomb of the Spider Queen. Vision around turn-ins alone is almost enough to make Tassadar like a top-tier pick on Tomb of the Spider Queen in particular, because if you have Tassadar in the mid lane, he can goaltend really, really well, because he can reveal if people are trying to turn in, and then anyone who has like a ranged poke ability can just be like, no, and stop the turn in. He also has Psystorm, which helps with that. But then he also has Wave Clear, and Tomb of the Spider Queen is the most Wave Clear centric map, basically, because Wave Clear is the objective. Wave Clear enables rotations, which is really important on laning maps, and the objective is physically in lane. And then the objective itself requires Wave Clear to get rid of. And if you have better Wave Clear, you get more value out of the objective. So, like, everything on Tomb of the Spider Queen comes down to Wave Clear. If you don't have Wave Clear, your objective is to kill the enemy Wave Clear heroes so that they don't have Wave Clear either. And that's still, you know, Wave Clear, right? It's not that you're killing them to kill them, you're killing them because you need to deal with their Wave Clear. And that's the only way, if you have like a pick style comp, it's the only way you have of out wave clearing them is to kill their wave clear and then clear. So Tassadar having really, really good wave clear and having vision around an ability that will give vision of both turn-ins if he's positioned in the mid lane is just huge in and of itself. Like, ignore everything else, just that is good enough. The fact that he's also a safe pick into many, many solo lanes is a big deal, because means in the early game, you know you're not going to lose the lane. You might not win it, but you're definitely not going to lose it. And because of his E, he can always pick up gems safely. He can always, shield and go in and pick up the gems, and if he ends up taking too much damage, he can E out and he'll be fine. You can never deny Tassar from picking up the gems, which is an important consideration, because every lane is, 33% of your gem income. It's 33% of the objective every time a wave comes up. So ignoring the Tass Tracer synergy, just Tassadar by himself, top tier pick on him with Spider Queen 100% of the time. And then Tracer is arguably, at a high level play, one of the best heroes you can pick if you have Tassadar, regardless of the map. So it's not that Tass Tracer is good on Tomb specifically, although having a pick hero is good on Tomb, because, as I said, if you can kill their wave clear heroes, then your wave clear is automatically better because their wave clear heroes are dead. So it's not that Tass Tracer is good on Tomb specifically, it's that Tass is really good on Tomb, and Tracer is really good with Tass. So it's just any map where Tassadar is good, you can pick Tass and then pick Tracer. It is a little bit better on Tomb because of the close rotations. It's a little bit more interesting on Tomb because of the close rotations. If you can pick off their wave clear heroes really consistently in the early game, you can get a huge tempo advantage that will get you exceptionally far ahead. And the only way to beat that is to have like an incredible amount of wave clear, so that for every pick they miss soak because your wave clear is that good. One of the best heroes to do that is Zul. This is a Zul ban. We're almost done, actually. We have four more questions from the Reddit thread, and then we will open the floor to questions from chat. So the next question is MVP Miracle versus Blossom in Vernal Shrines. On the last shrine, Miracle just threw the game. Like, there's not really no way of putting that. So the question is, I think it's right here. No, it's a little bit further on. Alright, so the question is, what was Miracle trying to accomplish? Bear in mind, Miracle already has a keep down in the top lane. The objective spawns, and they don't go for it at all. Illidan starts pressuring bottom, and they're mid. They clear, like, this is a 4-man mid clear. I think there was some debate on their comms about what to be doing here, because it doesn't make sense if they're going to be pressuring the bottom keep for their entire team to clear one mid wave and then go this way when they could have all five been here. So it looks like there was some discussion, at least, or maybe some disagreement on comms. We can't know that, obviously. But we're going to watch what happens. And they already have a keep down. They have a fort up in this lane, so they're not going to lose a keep, even if they shouldn't lose a keep if it's a 5v5, even if they lose the Punisher. So they can afford to give that up. And if they can trade the Punisher and a fort for a keep, that's a really reasonable trade for them. And I think that's what they were trying to do here. So this forces the back from Blossom. They end up not quite getting the well, but they do get the front wall. And they start to leave a little bit late. And here's where I'm not thrilled with their decision-making. They get clean away. They're done. They're 100% safe at this point. And Judy goes back in because Stitches is stuck on the side of the force wall. So the devastating charge value, you can see Stitches takes a lot. And then they disengage, and then they get the root, and Stitches lives. Stitches gets the Devour for the health restore. Stitches gets, I think, Uther's not quite in range yet, but he gets the maybe he didn't. Maybe it's just the Devour, but he recovers a ton of health. I think there was a globe picked up there. I think that's what that the part of that health restore is. And he does the hungry stitches. He just eats the entire enemy team. And he loses blink there, the blink from hungry stitches to dodge the APOC. And at this point, this is a 5v2 very, very briefly. And people start to come out. But healing is there. Gondor manages to make it out, throws the hook, it doesn't get anywhere. And Tassadar gets instantly deleted by the Genji Arthas, and now we have Genji on the chase with Dragon Blade. There's no way anyone gets out of here. They end up wiping, and the game is over. Stitches single-handedly won that fight with Hungry Stitches. I don't know if we're going to see that very often, but Stitches literally single-handedly won that fight with Hungry Stitches. And it was all because Judy re-engaged on the force wall. And they're not going to go deeper than that, right? They're not going to... They fought it... They fought it right here. They're not going to go deeper than this. They're not going to chase into the keep in a straight 5v5. So if Blossom backs up, they just blew a bunch of heroics and didn't get anything. She just eats everyone and walks backwards. Maybe they end up dying to tower shots. You don't... I mean, there's possibilities here to secure a number of kills for Blossom. And Miracle doesn't really have a potential upside here. They don't really have a realistic situation where they're going to win a fight under keep. So it was clearly a snap call to get the force wall. They were really hoping they could get the kill on Stitches, and it just didn't end up working out because they underestimated exactly how tanky Stitches is and how scary hungry Stitches with the teleport can be, because you can't get away from him. And he can significantly delay you. And then with that delay, Odin came up. Uther got here when he was not here before. And, she just lived. So shout out to Gondar for single-handedly carrying that last team fight that ended up winning his team the game. I think Miracle just needed to back up and go to the objective. Because if they back up and go to the objective, it's only 12 taken so far. And they wouldn't have burned any heroics. I don't remember. I didn't see exactly when Army was burned, but if they managed to even bait Army and then back up and go to the objective, but they didn't. The first part of the decision made total sense. The second part of the decision, not so much. What do you think about the expert fight against Liquid on towers, and they needed to fight bottom lane when both towers were from Liquid? I can go over that if you guys want. Let me finish the Reddit thread questions, and I'll open up questions for chat. You think idea is improving? That they may end up being a stronger team than Envy by the time the Crucible, and that you're going to end up challenging MVP in that case. I don't know. It's going to depend a lot. The Crucible's a long way away right now, in my mind. We don't necessarily know if Hold It Down with its current roster is going to end up staying together, or if there's going to be roster swaps. It's really relatively easy to get into the Crucible, is the thing. You only need to place in the top 4 1 week. Last season, anyone who plays top 4 in the first week, or in any 1 week, would have ended up being in that top 16. It is going to be top 8 this time, I think, so it's going to be a little bit different. But if the roster for Hold It Down reformed with different people tomorrow, they would lose all their points. And I still think that they would be able to get into the Crucible fairly easily regardless. So I do think that the current trend, Niventic is getting worse and Even Death is getting better. So if that trend continues, but you never know. Niventic seems to be playing for a paycheck at the moment, which I'm not super happy with. Dreadnought referred to Cure as good, but not that good, in reference to Team Freedom's sudden success in becoming the top 2 team in NA. Yeah. Heroes of the Storm is a very, very team-focused game. So there's no situation where you add one player and your team goes from number 6, 5, 4 to 2, and you're like, it's all that player. On the other hand, nothing else changed, right? The only change was they added Cure. Cure brings a pretty broad hero pool of heroes he plays really well. Not just I can play these if I have to, but he actually enjoys playing Abathur. He plays Abathur very well. There's certain heroes that he just plays very, very well. So he brought a different hero pool, which helped their drafting a lot. There were a lot of times they found a couple drafts for them last season that worked for them, and the top teams figured out how to counter those drafts, so they just didn't work. With Cure's hero pool, they've managed to broaden out the strategies they can have in terms of drafting, and that's had a significant impact. Also, behind the scenes, we don't know what's going on in terms of attitude. Maybe Cure has just been a really positive influence on the team in terms of cheering people up, making people stay focused. Maybe the team environment's better. We don't know, but we do know that the only thing that changed was that Cure is on the team, and they went from here. And I think Dread's point was Cure is not such a good mechanical player that you can explain the entirety of their success just by saying Cure is good at the game. But I think you can explain the entirety of their success just by saying that whatever it is Cure is contributing to the team, be that mechanics, drafting knowledge, hero pool, team fighting, has had a significant impact. And we often said last season that Team Freedom was one thing away from being a top team. They just seemed to be on the verge constantly of just being right up there, and they weren't there. So Cure was the thing that pushed them over for whatever reason. And I agree with Dredd that Cure is good, but Cure is not enough to just be enough in and of itself if you're talking purely mechanical skill. There's some other thing that he's bringing, some other X factor. And it's possible, exactly. Sexy boy in chat. Just confidence. Kira is an exceptionally confident player. If he's bringing that confidence to his team and helping build them up, that can be a really, really big thing. I think they're a much stronger team. But they're third place now and finished fourth place last season, so they still have to show it. That's fair. I think they're second place right now, actually. No Tomorrow versus Roll20, Game 1. Dredd referred to Dahaka as a primary warrior, which I don't think is either poor wording or flowery language that doesn't really amount to anything meaningful. This was a game that had no traditional tank. Was this played as a tankless composition, as you mentioned before? Do you think this was a game where Dahaka was played as the main tank? If not, was Sonya the main tank, or was it just Double Bruiser? If Dahaka was the main tank, why was Goku playing them instead of Justing? This was a Double Bruiser tankless game. Can you talk about it? Drafts, comp, maps, etc. Explain. That's actually a really in-depth question. We'll have to go back here. So this is the game, Roll20 versus No Tomorrow on Infernal Shrines. As you can see, Roll20 does not have what you would classify as a main tank. Third overall? I think that might be third overall. But I think for this phase, they're number 2. At least. Unless Master League is lying to me, which is possible. I guess they are tied. Oh, 119 lost 10. They tiebreaker versus Tempo Storm. That makes sense. Yeah, they're third for the phase. This is why you look at the official website, ladies and gentlemen, and not at Master League. Master League is a very useful tool, but it is limited in some ways. Correct. All right. So tankless compositions. The biggest reason Dahaka was not a main tank prior is because he had no initiation. He just didn't have the mobility to actually get on top of someone and force a fight, which is something that tanks have to be able to do. He had the survivability. He doesn't really have. He didn't really have the warding, but the movement speed in bushes also helps with that. And he can definitely do that more now, especially when agility is finished. But agility has to be finished. He really needs agility to be finished for that to be true, which means you have to play relatively passively in the early game. Medivh also helps with this a lot because portals are a good initiation in and of themselves, regardless. And as for why Justin was playing Sonya and Goku was playing Dahaka, I'm sure that's purely a hero pool issue. I don't imagine Justin spends a lot of time playing Dahaka, since Dahaka is almost always going to be the off tank in a composition. I know he spends some time playing Sonya. He likes playing Sonya, so it's just like a personal thing. It's not like he's been playing it in... I imagine he's been playing it in scrims. I don't think they just pulled this out. But Goku's going to be their main Dahaka player. It doesn't make sense to have Justin lane Dahaka for the times when they're playing tankless compositions when they could just put Justin on a different warrior. It's already a bruiser, since more than half the time they play Dahaka, Justin's going to be on an actual tank. So they have the Medivh, they have the enhanced agility, and basically they shouldn't be trying to take fights unless they're over the objective until enhanced agility is finished. So if you watch the game, I encourage you guys to do this. They don't really do much outside of the laning phase. They just do the laning phase. They do their rotations. They just try to get ahead. They end up getting ahead. Coming in late, but no Diablo for roll 20 on this map. Mathiel is pretty good against Diablo. This is a draft order. So Mathiel was picked up. They could have picked Diablo into Mathiel, but it's pretty risky. And I actually think Mathiel was picked up because No Tomorrow was thinking about the Diablo pick. This comp is reasonably good against Diablo. I would not have picked Diablo into this comp. So they've gotten 2 early picks so far. They're doing better rotations. They're getting ahead in wave clear, but I think they give up every single Punisher. So the Punisher goes over to No Tomorrow here. It doesn't get that much value. Roll 20 is just macroing and macroing and macroing. And there comes a point, I think it's at level 13, maybe even later. And they give up this Punisher too. Yeah, it's even later. So this is the first fight where they actually win. They actually go in and try and pick a fight and just straight up win. Haka's in the top lane, but he'll burrow in momentarily here, and the fight will get started. Just waiting on Dahaka. See, they're backing up. They're waiting for Dahaka. Waiting and waiting. Man, Goku, do you even burrow in? All right. So Goku comes in. He has movement speed. I believe Enhanced Agility is actually finished at this point. He goes immediately for the initiation onto Rhaegar. They get him. They focus, and they can't quite make it work. We see the Poison Nova come out. Leyline Seal to delay. And we are going to see a focus on Equinox, the Gust, and the Ancestral make the save. Goku is trying to catch up the enemy team. Walking through the bile is not helpful. Justin gets rooted by Zul, backs up, gets the Protect, gets the immediate portal out. By the way, Medivh is one of the best counters to Stitches because Protect denies the burst and portal just allows you to walk back out. So if you know a team has a Medivh player, you have to think about how you have to think about Stitches being not the best pick in the world. Something to consider. And we're going to see Jason have to barrel out. But they get completely forced off the shrine, and Roll20 picks it up. Roll20 doesn't actually get a kill at any point, but they finally felt comfortable initiating an all-out 5v5 team fight. They didn't have a talent tier advantage, but Enhanced Agility was finally finished as a quest. I think Master's Touch was also finished. So they had the things that they felt like they needed in terms of payoff to make their team fight work when they had a tankless composition. Up to this point, they've been doing nothing but macroing. And they gave up every single Punisher in order just not to sacrifice the lead that they'd established from the picks that they'd gotten with the composition that they had. And it's one of the best things you can do with a tankless comp is draft heroes that maybe don't necessarily give you great team fight potential in the traditional way a tank would, but give you really good wave clear or really good macro pressure and allow you to push really, really aggressively in. Zarya comps are the classic example, like Zarya, tankless, quote-unquote, Zarya comps on Brax's holdout are something that we've seen a lot of success with in Phase 1. We haven't seen it as much in Phase 2, but we also haven't seen as much Braxis in Phase 2. So, yeah, tankless comps, you need to really specifically think about how you're going to make up for that deficiency. In this case, they made up for it with Enhanced Agility and Medivh, which are obviously really, really, really strong things to deal with having initiation problems. And I actually think it's possible with the Enhanced Agility change, Dahaka could be a main tank on the right maps. You need a certain number of bushes is the thing. And you need to wait till the quest is finished before you can be very, very aggressive. I wouldn't recommend it in Hero League, except the fact that anything can work in Hero League if you just play really well. But in competitive, I definitely think that it may be possible to play for that late game consistently now. Certainly Roll20 demonstrated it was possible in this game. Last question from the Reddit thread. Vikings. Why did GFE go Vikings on Towers of Doom? I get it's a good pickup for this with a strong Vikings player, but VFC does not have a great Vikings player. Michael Udall has actually always played Vikings. He hadn't played Vikings for like 6 or 8 months. The last time GFE picked Vikings in HGC, they ended up winning with it. That was against Roll20 on Cursed. They did a tankless comp. They did a tankless Zarya comp that ended up getting really, really far ahead and just tempoing out the game. I don't think it was. I think it may have partially been we're up 2-0. We have room to see, how Michael's doing in competitive environment with Vikings. But Michael has always played Vikings. He was just very, very rusty on Vikings the last time he played them. I don't know if he's been practicing them. But GFP has a Vikings player. It's not a matter of being a bad Vikings player. It's a matter of being a very rusty Vikings player. Although he was never like a Hasselhoff's level Vikings player, right? Although who is? So that's fair. I know Uther has been top tier for a while now, but I realized during Temple Freedom that he's first pan pick every game, and when every game he was used in, is Uther here to stay? Yes. Is he really that strong? Yes. Yes, he is. You can misdraft Uther. You can draft Uther into situations where he's not going to excel because he's so cooldown based. Dread criticizes teams a lot for that. Whenever Uther loses a game, Dread actually will comment on the draft and how they didn't have sustained damage to deal with the fact that Uther is a cooldown based support. Oh yeah, and also K1. Oh, did K1 play it? Guys, am I crazy? K1's played Vikings before too. It's been a while. Hey, K1 Pro played Vikings. So they actually have 2 Vikings players. They actually have 2 experienced Vikings players who just haven't played Vikings in a while. I'm crazy. I don't know why I thought. That makes way more sense. I guess I am used to saying K1 on Tassadar lately, but I think I'm just used to seeing Hasu Vikings and everyone else is terrible in comparison. Well, Hasu may well be the best professional Vikings player in the world right now, so that's like saying you see JPL play Stitches and you're like, nah, no one else can play Stitches. There's some other good Stitches players in the world, guys. They're just not JPL. Over the past 2 weeks, there have been a few games with hyper-carry assassin compositions. 1 assassin, 2 support, 2 tank. 2 warriors. 2 warriors, not 2 tanks. I don't think we've seen a double tank comp. Because there's been a huge preference towards Dahaka for that style of comp, and Dahaka is debatably a tank. I'm not 100% sold either way. Which heroes, in your opinion, work in the hyper-carry role? Vala works in that role. Tracer works in that role. Cassio works in that role. Grayman works in that role. We have occasionally seen Gul'dan in that role, but it's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. Cho'Gall works in that role. Well, I should say Gaul works in that role, and then Cho is one of your tanks. You want to see some really good Cho'Gall games? Korea has you covered. There have been some really good Cho'Gall games in Korea recently. Basically, they need to have exceptionally high damage, and they need to be ranged. You're not going to have a melee carry in the current state of the game that can do that style of play. We have seen that style of composition with Naz before. Zul'jin, but it's awkward. Like, Zul'jin can theoretically do it, and we've seen it, we've seen Zul'jin do it on, like, Braxis once or twice, but it's not the same. So no Butcher Illidan, no. Butcher and Illidan are not going to be the super hyper carries. You won't see like a Falstead doing it either. Falstead's damage just isn't high enough. We've seen it with Sergeant Hammer. We've seen Korea do it with Sergeant Hammer in Phase 1. We have not seen it with Sergeant Hammer since then. I think it's possible to do it with Sergeant Hammer, but I think Sergeant Hammer is like the 7th or 8th best choice, and since there's only 4 bans in a game, I don't think you're going to see Hammer do it. So yeah, the list is not super long, but in fairness, like a few months ago, the list would have been 3 heroes, so now it's like 7 or 8, even if they're not necessarily top tier. What's your take on Cleave build Zera? It's a wave clear build. If for some reason you're doing macro pressure with Zeratul, which is a viable strategy, I'm not going to say it's optimal. I can't think of a situation where it's optimal, so I'm going to say it's viable as opposed to optimal. You can do that. I wouldn't encourage people to play Zeratul that way, because I think if you're going to play Zeratul, you ought to focus on his strongest build overall, as opposed to a potentially niche build, which is not necessarily ever going to be top tier. That said, wave clear is never a bad thing. And I think there's a break point with the Q build where you eventually do one shot the wave with Q, which as a 6-second cooldown ability can be significant, but it's not as happy as I would like it to be. It's not as happy as I would like it to be. All right, we had a question earlier on. Expert fight against Liquid on towers. This is from chat, so no advanced prep. I lost my Europe tab. So the question was, what did you think about the expert fighting against Liquid on towers and they needed to fight bottom lane when both towers were from Liquid? When were you talking about the last fight? Just remember GFE versus Tempo did Sergeant Hammer. Yeah, fan likes Hammer. Like it's not unheard of. Hammer is definitely one of those heroes that's capable of being the hyper carry. I just think that with the Cassia release and the tweaks to some of their heroes, there are heroes that are now significantly better at it. And you're not unlikely to be in a situation where Hammer is the best possible pick. It's not impossible, it's just unlikely. So I think the fight he's talking about happens later on in the game. Where Expert is forced to fight top because of boss. The fight where Rhaegar and Greymane died under Liquid's tower. That was earlier then, right? When they were pressuring in. Have you covered any Black's Gazla game yet? It's a troll pick yet? Yes. I'm not going to say it's a troll pick because I think that Gazla may actually be competitively viable on Infernal Shrines, especially. But I will say that Rich plays a lot of Gazlo in Hero League, and whenever he plays Gazlo in Hero League, he says he's trolling. Rich played Gazlo in that game. I'm just saying. I did cover it, though. It is earlier on in the VOD. That's Illidan Tyrael dying. So we're looking for a Greymane Rhaegar death under the tower. I feel like this happened earlier in the game. I feel like I passed it. Well, the game's over, so I definitely passed it.
Feed me Seymour.
Love soup. Thank you for the follow. Not sure if you love soup or if love soup is a dish you make where people will eat it and they feel love. Expert was in the middle of mid lane because of Shrine, but we're surrounded by... Oh. I think it's this fight, right? So bottom was taken, mid was taken. So they had this area to come in through. I think this is the fight. So this is a... Hopefully this is the fight you're talking about. This is always a problem on Towers of Doom here, and the Koreans invented this strategy of consistently capping both sapper camps. You'll see teams doing it really, really aggressively now in all regions where they just constantly try and get the sapper camps on cooldown. And then once you have the bottom fort or the bottom bell tower turned over to you, you can sit on it, right? As long as you can send 2 people off, 3 people can defend pretty comfortably underneath a fort versus even a 5-man push. And if you have globals in particular, people can rotate in very, very quickly. And you get in a situation where the bottom bell tower essentially controls 2 out of the 4 altars, right? So it controls the mid one and the bot one. So whenever you have this situation where the enemy team is controlling the bell tower and you just can't get it back, you're in a lot of trouble because any altar phase that spawns, you basically have two areas of entry. You have this narrow little channel, which anyone who's walked through narrow channels against, Impale or Leyline or VP or anything that forces you to group up, or punishes you for grouping up, I should say, it's really, really, really dangerous to do that. And then, or the mid. Kid Kerrigan, thank you for the host. So, something to always consider. And you can see Liquid's abusing this. They have Blumby zoning this area, knowing that that's one of the only really major entry points, and Splendor's sort of blocking the other one as soon as Nick comes in and he allows for the backup. And Dark Mop's just on the flank here, making sure that people can't come in, doing a lot of damage, giving Ariel hope. Bad Benny's trying to be like, I'm not here, thinking about if he can queue over the wall, if he needs to queue over the wall. Tries to get the kill on the Viking here. We do see the jump there. It's ridiculous. They essentially burned Hunt to kill Eric. A lot of damage there from the Greymane cocktail, but it doesn't actually matter. Bad Benny's juking with the sword here. Very nicely done. But in the end, they just can't commit because they have a very limited path of retreat. So they go in as deep as they dare. They don't end up getting anything out of it. They don't have a situation where they feel like they can get a pick. And Rhaegar ends up getting absolutely destroyed. Nick was really far out. I'm absolutely certain Bad Benny called that he was tapping. And whenever you have a situation where your tank's like, I'm leaving to go tap, everyone else has to be like, okay, he's leaving to go tap. I need to back up. I can't just be here without my tank. And the overstay by Curson there really, really cost him. And of course the Cocoon onto ADRD. He does actually end up getting out of there. Maybe this wasn't the fight you were talking about, but the principles apply. Anytime you're in the situation where you have completely controlled the avenues which the enemy team can come at you, and you have a lot of different potential, because you can back up to this fort, you can back up to this fort, you can come around this flank here and be totally fine. They have two methods of approach. They have two areas they can come at you, and if they don't make one of those work, they can't win the fight. They have to back up. They have to tap. 16 was achieved there by the Vikings, so they should have left anyway, and they were just a little bit too far forward. The Cocoon hitting the Greymane. I think Curson was trying to save ADRD. That's why he ended up stepping up right there, but that was just not, in the end, a good decision. Not the fight, but thanks anyway. We can find the exact fight. It gives you an idea of how powerful Liquid's control was, that there's more than one fight where they had control of the bell towers. Was it this fight? It's probably this fight. In this fight, they're actually behind. So they definitely want to win this if they can. And this is absolutely insane that both of these top altars were capped. Again, they're picking out the Vikings. This actually matters. The Vikings can be a really big threat. There's a lot of damage from the triple combination of spin to win. So if you let a Viking wander around in your backline, he can play again, have all three Vikings there, and then spin to win. And it actually does a pretty significant amount of damage. So Blumby gets out. That absorbed a lot of resources. Cleanse is up. Ancestral still Cleanse was used. Ancestral is still available, so they're not necessarily out of this fight. Hunt was used. They have Sank, however, and they are going to see the Sank. Balog again. They make sure they get these kills because they don't want. Actually, Balog died. No. He did die. And this is unusual. I'm going to say it's unusual for this many people to be this low with double support, because generally the benefit of double support is no one ever really gets low. You're never really in danger of anyone dying. But it doesn't seem like Darkmok was doing enough damage. So Ariel was not getting the healing she needed. So Ariel ends up going down. They ended up trading for the Illidan, which is really good for them. And Expert, they can retreat into their thing, and Expert's chasing them into this area, and that ends up not being such a good take. So don't chase people under towers when you're that low, I think is the rule here. But again, it gives them a significant advantage because it gives them significant control. That was Rhaegar Illidan. You said it was Rhaegar Greymane that died, but I think the principles still apply. Yeah. With regards to Diablo 7, Soul Shield seems to be the standard. Is Regen ever better? Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna break this down into two parts. I'm gonna break this down into professional play and not professional play. In competitive play with communications, where Focus Fire is really, really good, Soul Shield is better. Because if everyone focuses fire and pushes their buttons on the same target at the same time, Soul Shield will literally save you from dying. The other ones won't do that. So in competitive, Soul Shield is better. But, and this is a big but, because you're seeing Diablo played with Medivh a lot in competitive, especially when you're talking about Roll20. Medivh's level 16 talent that causes the target to be healed for 50% of the damage they take during Force of Will. The healing is done after armor is accounted for. So if you take 100 damage, you get healed for 50. If you have 25 armor and you take 100 damage, you get healed for half of 75. One of the reasons that Justing always takes battle moment or diabolical momentum when he has Medivh on his team, played by Glaurung, is because the amount of damage that you're not getting healed for during Force of Wills is actually really significant when Force of Will lasts for 1.5 seconds out of every 5. It's actually a noticeable difference versus the power of having the combo up more often, because Diablo is his combo. Especially when you're talking about Devastating Charge and Overpower at 16, when you have those things going off consistently together, you're going to get a lot of value out of Diabolical Momentum, just comboing and comboing and comboing and comboing over and over and over again. So it's a matter of margin. Soul Shield's never bad value, but the combination makes Diabolical Momentum plus Medivh a little bit higher value to do the other thing. If you're in an environment where Focus Fire is really bad, which is most of Hero League for most people, my guides are written, and I recommend this in my guide. My guides are written for the most part that anyone from Bronze to Masters could pick them up and get a lot of useful information out of them. Soul Feast is basically over 40 health per second at full souls. I think with your natural regain, it actually is over 50 in the late game. And in an environment where Focus Fire is really poor and people not necessarily hit their skill shots, Soul Feast, on average, will give you more survivability than Soul Shield will. That's never going to be true. It's almost never going to be true in competitive, because people hit their skill shots. People can Focus Fire really well. And it stops being true around Masters and Grandmasters. It's still true it stops being true somewhere in Diamond, I think, where people finally start getting the Focus Fire thing down to some degree. But that's like less than 2% of players for whom that's true. Dibble's life level 1 each. When is it viable? Actually, I talked to Justin about this a little while ago, and he made an argument, and I'm not saying he's right, but he made an argument that I think is viable, which is that Life Leech allows you to 1v1 other tanks. So if you're on a map like Dragonshire and you're not necessarily going to be with your team 100% of the time, like you're not always going to be with a 4-man because there's a skirmish going on there and your team needs to do that and you just need to sit here and hold the shrine for a little bit, Life Leech will allow you to like 1v1 in Johanna. Whereas if you don't have Life Leech, Johanna can hold the shrine against a Diablo for a pretty long time pre-13, because Devastating Charge is not the big threat that it otherwise would be. My counter-argument is if you have Devil's Due and you have a sufficient number of souls, you can just go clear the mage minion, grab the globe, and then come back. But over that short period of time, you will lose control. So if you're actually sitting there and you have to hold the objective so that your team can cap, that's like the one scenario anyone has ever presented to me and then demonstrated it via a replay where I was like, Life Leech was technically the best choice. Maybe. Outside of that, it's awful. It's like such a bad talent. But there may be, I'm leaving it as a trap in my guide for now, but there may be situations at like a really high level of play where your team is all on the same page, where maybe it's acceptable. So what I'm hearing is Diablo is the true Chen counter. I haven't done the Chen math, actually. That's a good point. If it allows you to get, if Life Leech allowed you to get all the way through Chen's shield and do real damage to him every auto attack, maybe. Can I make him a soul lane on D-Shard then, like versus Dahaka? It doesn't work in... maybe. Maybe. It is possible. I'm going to say it's not probable. But it is just barely possible that Diablo could theoretically soul lane versus certain melee heroes with Devil's Due. Or not Devil's Due, but Life Leech. It's possible. I wouldn't want to try it. If anyone out there is a Diablo main and wants to try it and send me try it at like a relatively high level of play and send me the replay, I would be curious to watch it, and I would definitely do a stream about it if it ended up working out. And I would reevaluate my guide. I'm going to say that it's probably not a good idea to have Diablo as your solo laner. There's probably better picks for it, but maybe. Maybe. But yeah, the Medivh synergy is the reason you see Diabolical Momentum picked up by a lot of professional Diablo players, including Justine. Sometimes he picks it up even when he doesn't have Medivh, and he ends up dying a little bit more than he wants to. Those two things are related. How often is... We actually have a decent amount of replays. We can actually check. So 37 games of Soul Shield, 10 games of Soul Shield, 8 games of Momentum. So it's still Soul Shield for the most part in professional play, which I agree with. I actually do have 1 game of regen here. 100% win rate. That's back when they were teammate. That was the qualifier number 3. That was a while ago. So in HGC we haven't had it. Haven't had the regen yet. Any other questions before we wrap up the last HGC post show of phase 2? What are they calling it? Their names are so awkward that I keep forgetting. It's phase 2, group stage 1. Diablo's lack of wave clear hurts him as a soul laner. Yes, that's true. His wave clear isn't like the worst thing in the world, but I think he did like it. It's going to be awkward that your sustain is only coming from being able to hit the enemy opponent, because you're not going to get sustain off the wave. Leoric is that same situation, but Leoric has an escape and better wave clear. So, 1% of Shen's life at level 1 is 27. Brew. Diablo's A speed is less than 1. So it's probably not. Probably not. So if Diablo's life leech is... No, Ozerman, no, it cannot. No. Just no. Leo doesn't run out of mana. If you do run out of mana, just die. You'll have full mana in a few seconds. Don't actually do that. I'm kidding. For those of you... some people don't understand when they hear a joke. Don't actually just feed on Leo to get your mana back. ADVS for level 1 is 99. So that's 126 DPS. It doesn't out-damage brew shields per second. Alright. Now we know. I'm actually very curious to see what the Chen buff is going to look like, because they are making it so that you still get full brew over 2.5 seconds, but you initially get 20 or 40 brew or something instantly the moment you start drinking, and you, instead of getting 40 brew per second, you get 20 brew per second. Which means that, especially with Deadly Kick, you're going to be able to drink, combo, and then you'll have to wait, but you can't ever get silenced for 5 seconds when you drink at 0 brew and you immediately get interrupted. People still draft percent damage versus Cho'Gall. Do you think it's still the strongest counter to him? The strongest counter to Cho'Gall has always been Cocoon, because you instantly force a 3v5. Things like Maw also work. Anything that can just get rid of Cho'Gall for a little while, and then you have a hard engage comp that allows an instant 5v3, you're in good shape. The best way to kill Cho'Gall is things that trap him, and then things that obviously do do percent-based damage because they ignore his new armor trait. Leoric, in that sense, is probably the best Cho'Gall counter because of Tomb plus Drain, but most people do not play Leoric well into that matchup. They just don't put enough pressure on him. seen people play the matchup without taking Hopelessness. Cho'Gall is so mobile that you will never keep up with him if you do not take Hopelessness. You need to accept that Entomb is probably going to trade for Aegis or whatever the support save is, but that has a longer cooldown than Entomb does, because Entomb has a very short cooldown. So you Entomb him, you trade for cooldowns, and then you drag the fight out until Entomb's up again, and then you Entomb him again, and now there's no save. Doing that without comms is very difficult. And Cho'Gall excels in long duration fights, especially if he gets Ariels as support. So it's actually scarier now than it was before. I think Aegis is 60 seconds and Tomb is 50. So you have like a really, really narrow window where you can do some magic. I will say that Korea has been playing a lot of Cho'Gall. They played it in multiple games this past couple weeks. They apparently are playing it in scrims. Rich gave an interview and said literally, it seems like whoever gets Cho'Gall just wins. That was basically his exact quote. He was talking about scrim results and the tournament results so far. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Cho'Gall picked up at Eastern Clash at all. As a bruiser main, I honestly prefer running Arthas and Cho'Gall than Leoric unless I can show the 20. It's so much easier to execute. Yeah, like Cho'Gall's current build is just zoomy. I don't know, there's no other word for it. He can zoom around with his Q. He can just constantly get on top of people and then get back out. So locking him down is step number 1. Figuring out how to deal the damage to him is step number 2. Leoric is nice because in theory he can do both. But if you have just Arthas, if you have Arthas Tychus, that's reasonable because Arthas locks him down and then Tychus does the damage. The problem is if he gets to 16, he is unstoppable on Q, right? He's channeling Q, he's unstoppable. You can't do anything about it. That's a problem. That's the big problem because eventually you get to a point where you need walls to lock him down, which again, Entomb is a wall. Unstoppable doesn't mean anything to it. Although he can Q Leoric out of the way and get out of the Entomb pretty easily at that point. When the biggest hero is the most mobile? Yeah, I mean, I'm not the most mobile, but he's pretty zoomy. He's pretty zoomy. If you're not winning by 16, you're probably going to have issues. That's true. The nice thing about Cho'Gall's rework is it gave him not necessarily awful early game, but his late game is just as strong as it was before. So if you don't tempo out a Cho'Gall comp, you're not going to win the late game. I don't understand the hero Cho'Gall. What's the most damage of his kit? How do you play around him? How do you take 1 billion damage from him? Yeah. Cho'Gall is pretty strong right now. There's just no other way to put it. Cho'Gall is just really, really, really strong. And Cho'Gall Ariel is maybe the most broken 3-man in the game in terms of sheer like power. The best counter to Cho'Gall is probably macro play. Because they're down a body, it makes it much harder to respond to rotations. And, you know, since the mount change, it's harder to respond to rotations anyway. So if you think a team's going for a Cho'Gall comp, you can draft purely from macro. And just be like, you can have Cho'Gall. We're just going to kill all your forts. What are the best heroes to pair with Cho'Gall Ariel? So you're down a body. It's really important to have a global if you can get it. Just because it gives you that option of, you know, pressuring elsewhere on the map. Someone who can do camps by themselves, basically independent heroes. So Cho'Gall Ariel are going to be together as a trifecta no matter what. For the rest of the game, those 3 are together. Which means if Ariel is to heal someone and it's choice between you or Leoric, it's going to be, or you or Cho'Gall, it's going to be Cho'Gall. So heroes who can take care of themselves and do things on their own are very, very useful. Leoric for Royal Focus. You could have a wave clear hero like Zul who could like double soak, as long as he did it safely, because Cho'Gall can put a lot of siege pressure onto buildings. Falstad is fine for the global. Dahak is fine for the global. With the Vala Trinity not China Cho'Gall comps, first pick Ariel and then get Task Vala and take away Keepies. Taking Ariel away is a good response to dealing with Cho'Gall, although I will say that Cho'Gall is really good against Vala. Because Vala can't get away from him, and it's really hard to heal a Vala through Cho'Gall's damage if the Cho'Gall is being played well, because Cho'Gall's damage is enormous. He just does so much damage. I don't think people appreciate how much damage a well-played Cho'Gall does, because a well-played Cho'Gall, an averagely played Cho'Gall, the Cho and the Gall will do the same amount of damage, and it will be assassin level damage. At the end of it, like a 15-20 minute game, it'll be 70 to 90k, pretty comfortably. A well-played Cho'Gall comp where the Gall can max out his damage will do double the damage of the Cho, and the Cho will still do 70 to 90k damage. That's like a realistic number. Most Galls don't hit enough of their skill shots and don't hit their skill shots like literally on cooldown when they're just spamming it to feed hope to the Ariel. So most Galls are doing a lot less damage. If you're good at Gall, you should always be doing more damage than your Cho. Exors in chat. So we have a GM player in our team who played a lot of Cho, and it took me several games to start out damaging him. Still not doing enough. And it's the way it is right now. Cho'Gall's current build, current talents, offer him a huge amount of damage, and you just need to be... the standard build form, Consuming Fire is really good, or Calloused Hide. I prefer Calloused Hide because you generally just swap over to your armor whenever you're getting focus, and when you're getting focus is when you need the most healing. So especially if you have an Ariel, this helps Ariel a lot in terms of saving you in the early game. Feel for the Flaming is really good in theory, like in the very, very late game, but since your late game's already so strong, do you need to make it stronger by making your early game slightly weaker? And I think the answer is usually no. And then Consuming Blaze is just like generically good. If you're in the early game and you're against a lot of melee heroes, this will give you a lot of value. But if you're not against a lot of melee heroes, it's not going to do much for you. And then you just go Uppercut, Power Surge, and these two together are what give you that massive mobility. They give you a lot of damage because it's 7% per hero hit and then a 4-second cooldown reduction. Bear in mind that Q only has a 12-second cooldown, so if you hit 3 heroes, this is back up instantaneously. Upheaval is good for wombo combos and just like initiating fights. I prefer Hammer of Twilight on average because I think the level 20 upgrade is just a little bit more fun, and the ranged attack is really, really good. You go Runic Feedback because Runic, the bomb is a significant part of Gall's damage, especially if Gall is going for bomb build, you go Runic Feedback. Frenzied Fist is like whatever. Your auto-attacking faster does not do much for you, and then you go Surging Dash and whatever heroic you went to take the upgrade. That's it. You're done. That's the standard Cho build right now, and it's really, really strong. You don't swap over when you're getting focused, you're always getting focused. What's the best Diva build? Can't decide between Fusion Generator and Bring It On. Do you think she'll become more popular in HGC? I do think Diva will become... I thought Diva was going to be more popular in HGC, and then they nerfed the wrong part of her kit, in my opinion. We talked about this earlier. Fusion Generator has counterplay. Basically, if you're up against people who will stop attacking you the moment you put Defense Matrix on them, they just won't use cooldowns, and they won't auto-attack you. They'll use stop auto-attack or move instead of... or force move. Then Fusion Generator gets 0 value. One of the reasons we don't see it taken in pro play consistently is because teams will evaluate, will they stop attacking me? It's like, will they stop attacking a palm target? Then they won't attack a Defense Matrix Diva. In that case, Bring It On is guaranteed value. For the average Hero League player, the people you're up against aren't going to do that. Like, literally 98% of the player base will continue to attack you through your Defense Matrix, in which case you should just take Fusion Generator. But there's a reason you don't see it in pro play. You've mentioned you're looking for an emote artist for your channel. Most of GFU's partner via Twitch. Now, couldn't you ask them for recommendations? Yes. Yes, I could. That hadn't occurred to me. I've been really busy, for the record, in real life. But yeah, for those of you watching, I am looking for an emote artist to do sub emoticon, since I now have a sub button, and a subscriber emoticon, a couple other little art projects. So if anyone knows anyone they would like to recommend them, feel free to PM me their info on Discord or DM me on Twitter, something. I don't know about the best Diva build. The most popular Diva build is easily Hit the Nitrous. Fusion Generator. All of her 7s are pretty good. Coming Through is really good if you're peeling for your team. Like, if you're up against a dive comp, you can actually knock them back pretty significantly. Nuclear Options, hard to use correctly, and your team has to sort of be on the board with it. So Aggression Matrix or Coming Through, I think, are just really strong at this tier. There's a huge debate about which heroic is better. I like Big Shot. Bunny Hop's really good at forcing fights because you can queue in and then hop and then people can't get away. If you're on a team fight centric map and your team otherwise lacks good initiation, it's a really, really strong option. Which of the 13 talents is better is just math. If you're ever ahead in levels and you think you're going to stay ahead in levels, a Blade of Armor is better. Before the nerf, it was just pretty much always better even if you were even. Emergency shielding, I think, is a little bit of a crutch because it's about the same value as expensive plating, but like you should be able to hit your mech, right, and get out. So if you're not sure if a Blade of Armor is the better choice, and you're not very good at Diva, go emergency shielding, otherwise go expensive plating. But if you're ever ahead in levels, or you're against a team and you can look at their comp and be like, well, this does this much damage, this much damage, and they're all below the threshold, then you go Blade of Armor. A lot of heroes have a lot of abilities that are way below the threshold. Like Li Ming, each individual missile is its own damage source and disintegrate. So the only thing that goes over is Orb and Calamity. So if you see Li Ming doesn't go Calamity and goes Disintegrate, then a Blade of Armor is just like an easy pick into that. But if you're ahead in levels, then the scaling works out such that it's... Expensive plating is better with Big Shot. That's... I would say the downside is less significant. Is that good design to have a talent that requires a large lead for it to be viable? I mean, it doesn't require a large lead. There are a number of heroes in the game that it's always good against. Like the Li Ming example is right there. But there's also just... I mean, if Stitches doesn't go Slam build, then Slam falls below the threshold. So you'll take 50% damage for Slam. But I think if he goes Slam build, it goes over the threshold. Zeratul without Combo Slash is under the threshold for all his autos. He's over otherwise. If you see a Li Ming that didn't go Gleaming. Does it affect percent damage? It does affect percent damage, or it did. I think they fixed that. It was considered a bug. Because nothing is supposed to affect percent damage. It's supposed to be true damage. It did, and now it doesn't. I think they considered that a bug, and they fixed it. If it's not already fixed, it's in the works. Sometimes I will be talking to Blizzard, and they will tell me about things that are true internally that are coming down the line, and sometimes I get confused about which is where. Speaking of bugs, Genji Shuriken can still clear Zag Creep. That's interesting. They fixed her W to no longer mitigate percent damage, but not a Battle Blative. I think they fixed both. I think they fixed both. All of Naz, I believe, is under the threshold. Yeah, it's a good example. Naz, everything Naz does is under the threshold, regardless. So it's literally one of those things where you have to go through and look at every hero in the enemy comp and be like, well... But... if you're ahead in levels, it's just always good. Which I think is reasonable. I'm going to say most of her 16s are pretty good. Suppressing Fire is surprisingly strong. Nanoweave Suit is really strong. GG Well Played is the easiest talent by far to use at this tier, and arguably is the strongest one. So that's like sort of a gimme. If you don't play a lot of Diva, you're going to go GG Well Played like 90% of the time. And Torpedo Dash makes her feel really smooth to play because it gives her an escape in pilot mode, which is desperately needed. I love playing Diva with Torpedo Dash. That said, most of the time you're going to go GG Well Played, but all four of these talents are honestly very viable. It's just a question of playstyle, who you're up against, the map, what kind of team you have, stuff like that. And then Concussive Pulse seems good, but it's not bad. It's just not as good as her other talents at this tier. The upgrade to Pew Pew Pew, you get 3 times the cooldown and 50% more damage, possibly. That's pretty good. And Mecha Fall makes your mech call do damage and gives it a little bit of a teleport, right? Because it gives you a little bit of range. Those are both really good. I don't think the upgrade to Bunny Hop is worthwhile. It's not that much damage, and you have to be standing still. It's a little bit mechanically difficult to do. I don't think it's worth... I can't think of a scenario where this is honestly like super, super worthwhile. PPP was good, and Mecha Fall are really good. Concussive Pulse is okay, but I think it's worse than Mecha Fall, so I can't imagine a scenario where I would take Concussive Pulse over Mecha Fall. If that makes sense. You can stop move. You can. It's not like you can hit hold position and you'll stop moving as you're falling from the impact. And if you can do that kind of micro, you're guaranteed to get full value out of it. I think even when you're getting full value out of it, it's not that good because the cooldown on Bunny Hop is so long. Whereas in the late game, you can go through a lot of mechs in the late game, and Mecha Fall is going to get you a ton of value, like over and over and over again. Other questions? That may be the last wrap up of the HGC post show. Kind of unrelated, but anyone happen to know when the Grow Mash stuff in China begins? I mean, if PTR is not up, PTR would be up by now if it was coming this week, so we can probably expect PTR next week. Right? Because PTR usually comes up on Tuesdays. I wouldn't be like 100% surprised. To see it happen midweek because of delays internally, and they just haven't talked to us about it, but we'll have to see. Anyway, that'll be it for the HGC post show. There will be a Western Clash pre-show next week, I think. We're going to talk about people going in, teams going in, what the expected results are probably going to be, the way the tournament's going to be formatted, group show, and then we'll have a post show after the Western Clash as well. How do you feel about Valeera as a soft counterpick to Genji? I mean, point and click stun. You just stay stealth until Genji comes in, and you just... I guess you'd actually want to silence him, right? Not stun him. Because as long as he can't deflect or jump out, it seems fine. Glau or Bakery, fifth guy? I mean, I imagine they'll invite Bakery because he's not as... doesn't have to travel as far. I think I'd prefer to see Bakery over Glau. Thoughts on ETC? He is seeing more pro play. ETC seems like a good pick tank. Like, Power Slide is basically an unmissable stun at a high level. Like, it's so hard to miss Power Slide. So if you're running a pick comp, ETC is really good. Also, we're seeing, this weird trend of, oh, well, you drafted Uther? Guardian of Kings is too good, man. We're going to draft as limited CC as possible. And then the enemy team can draft ETC and like mosh pit. Like, how do you stop mosh pit if you have no CC? That said, ETC still has some survivability issues. So I will say he's draft dependent as opposed to unplayable. I'm going to upgrade him from unplayable to draft dependent, at least as far as pro play goes. Because for a while, I think he was actually unplayable in pro play. I think, and the teams who did play him got absolutely destroyed. Like, it was not close. And you could pretty much attribute that to ETC trying to make a play and dying at the start of every team fight. But he's better. Good enough? Don't know. But he's better. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen anyone run EDC as just like an off tank. Because he has wave clear post 7, and then he has a global at 10. You could just have him split push, and then come into fights and be like the stun tank for a hero who has low mobility like Arthas, and you play Arthas as your main tank, or maybe Arthas is your soul laner in the early game, and then you switch. I don't know. I'm surprised we don't see more respect for level 4 and level 7 wave clear spikes in terms of laning arrangements on different maps. But when we, occasionally when we do see it, the team has obviously practiced it, and they end up doing really, really well. We saw that a couple times from Roll20, where they had like 7 wave clear spikes, and then they would swap, and they'd have 13 power spikes, and then that's when they would start to fight. Their first Battles of Eternity game with Ragnaros Artanis, they ran. They had a clear 13 spike, and they played passively until 13. They almost lost a keep, and as soon as 13 hit, they were like all over it, and they won every fight afterwards and just dominated the match. All right, really wrapping up this time, guys. Really wrapping up. Thank you all for watching. I will be back tomorrow. I think I'm gonna make time. So tomorrow I'm gonna be on the Nexus Trolls podcast. It was on Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I will link their Twitch in chat. That will happen at 4:30 p.m. PST or 7:30 p.m. Eastern, depending on what your time zone is. I believe I should have time to do Going Alone before that, so I believe I'll be back tomorrow with some solo winning matchups at 1 p.m. PST on my channel. hopefully you guys come show up for that. If you're interested in Soul Winning, it's a really fun show. We just download replays from professional games and go over specific matchups. They all get uploaded to YouTube afterwards. You can go check them on YouTube right now if you want to see some of the older ones. And I think that's it. So thank you all for watching. And remember, this is a stream where we never lose. We always win. We learn something. Learning is always a win. Have a good night, everyone.